Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, the place for cops who want to transform their leadership, create more resilience, and generate more balance in their life. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living, both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Teslaw, and I'm a full-time lieutenant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm glad you're with us today. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at the Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure to join our Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads and a weekly email from me on things you need to know about. I also send out content that's exclusive to that list, so don't miss out on something that can help you in your life or in your job. Join our list at thesquadroom.net. This episode is sponsored by officerprivacy.com. In the age of the internet, social media, and smartphones, there's so much amazing information at our fingertips. I can research any topic or person I want to and learn all about them, their family, and way more information than I really should be able to. The problem is, people can do that research on us too. Whether we like it or not, our information is on the internet, out there for people to find, even the bad guys. Just accepting this and doing nothing isn't an option. We as cops have a giant target on our back these days. Sometimes that's literal and it's life or death, and other times it's just dealing with potential harassment. Either way, we don't want to expose our families to these risks. Being careful about what you post on social media doesn't go far enough. It's easy for a bad guy with an iPhone and free Wi-Fi to hunt you down. That's why officerprivacy.com exists. My friend Pete James is the founder, and he spent 25 years in law enforcement here in California, using much of his career to hunt down the criminals and evidence on the computers and the internet that we now use. Pete knows how easy it is to find you, and since he's one of the good guys, he can help. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will work to scrub the internet's top 50 people search sites that can expose your home address. Then they work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they will remove you again. They also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and the technical ability to do it yourself. I don't, so that's why I use their premium service, but you can do it all yourself using their proprietary software. You can remove yourself and your family members from these same top 50 people search sites on the internet, and then use the software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure that you haven't been added back. To learn more about how you can keep safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. You've heard me talking about our sponsor In Time for a few episodes now, and I wanted to share something with you that they just released. When they reached out to partner on the show, I knew they were the kind of company I wanted to work with because they obviously understand the challenges that the individual officers are facing out there on the streets. In Time now has a wellness solution available in addition to their scheduling and time management cloud software. The In Time Wellness Solution has a customizable library of department-curated recommendations, including doctors, counselors, and other resources. What's really cool is if you're using their scheduling software, you can also monitor staff fatigue and hours worked to ensure compliance with policy and stay safe with data-driven insights and dashboards. With fatigue management, smart alerts, you can protect agencies from liabilities and the avoidable accidents. Plus, their new training level alerts protect the agency and staff from working assignments they aren't prepared for or they aren't trained for. This can be a real liability, especially in larger agencies. If you're interested in spending less time on scheduling, eliminating redundant and expensive overtime, increasing your compliance with subpoenas, and reducing the stress and fatigue on your employees, go to intime.com/the squad room to learn more about their amazing system. My guest today is Jason Piccolo. Jason is the host of the Protectors podcast, and he is a prolific producer of content. And we talk about that in our conversation today. Jason, you may have seen him on numerous appearances on Court TV or on Fox News. He's the author of Unwavering, A Border Agent's Journey, and also a book, Out of the Shadows, about his experience being a whistleblower within the Border Patrol. He is still employed as a federal agent here and is based in D.C., and we'll talk a little bit about that. He is a infantry captain. He's a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom and left service as an infantry captain. Really great conversation today, just talking about the importance of creativity, finding an outlet, putting your voice out there, basically just kind of two podcasters who've been around in the game for a little while, talking about lessons learned in our long careers, how to confront changes in ourselves that need to be confronted. So lots of great conversation. So enjoy this conversation with Jason Piccolo.
We'll do it live.
We'll do. Well, I'll probably then just what I'm going to do, probably just edit in an intro clip of your bio.
Sounds great.
And that way
me,
we
man.
can just kind of roll with it, and we'll go from there. As that sounds right.
I'll do the same with you. There we go.
It's a lovely Friday morning, right?
I got my iced coffee. I got some water. I'm good to go, man.
Right on. Well, it's nice to finally meet you, quote unquote, meet you. As so many things happen these days now with, meeting is all virtual. You're on the other side of the country from me, right? You're in Virginia, or right outside DC. Yeah. Is that where you're from, or did you just land there with all the work you do?
No, shit, man. I don't even know where I'm from anymore. Washington, D.C. How the hell did I get here? That's a good question. So I grew up in New Jersey, actually.
Okay.
Then I joined the Army out of Pennsylvania because I was living there for a bit. Then the Army sent me to Oklahoma, then Oklahoma to Colorado, and Colorado to Texas. Texas, I went to school in Minnesota. In Minnesota, I went to California. In California, I went to, all over the country, man. I've worked a lot of times in San Diego, and then I made my way back out to the East Coast. And in between there, I did a tour in Iraq. So yeah, man, all over the place.
And when you were Border Patrol, were you mostly in the San Diego area, or were you all over the place?
Yeah, I was Border Patrol in San Diego, and a lot of people, because I wrote that book, The Border Agent's Journey, assumed that I just stayed in the Border Patrol. Mm-hmm. But I did 2.5 years in a Border Patrol. Then I became a special agent with the former U.S. Customs. So I literally moved 2 miles away from my Border Patrol station, but I still stayed in that same area in San Diego. But this time I was working drugs. So I did that for a while too.
HSI stuff?
Eventually it was the U.S. Customs Office of Investigations, which then eventually merges into becoming Homeland Security Investigations.
Mm-hmm. And that's quite you're bouncing around a lot. Is what I'm curious, because I used to live on the East Coast and never thought I'd live in California, but now that I live in California, can't imagine ever living anywhere else. But like, what was it about like that area or DC that attracted you to like creating your home base there, now that you're out of both of the, you're not being shipped around by the military or the federal government?
Yeah, I'm actually still a Fed, man. I'm a Fed until January 31st.
Oh, you are? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, man. I just never talk about my agency because they made a quasi agreement with me to say, you do whatever you want, just don't talk about what we do. I'm like, okay. So it's not an intelligence agency, but it's DC, man. I came out here to make a change.
Okay.
That really didn't work out so good, but I did. I came out here in 2011. And then I eventually stayed permanent out here. Came out here on temporary duty. But then, as I started raising kids out here, I'm like, I don't want to uproot them. I was uprooted so much when I was a kid and moved so many times. I wanted just to have them have a solid foundation, and I'll be here until they graduate. So I got another 6 years in the area.
Yeah.
And that's how I got out here.
That makes sense.
I did talk about not being non-IC, non-intelligence community, but I did just come off of a presidential management rotation, they call it. So I actually went back working for Homeland Security, working on policy this time for 6 months. So it's an interesting experience in D.C., man. It gives you a lot of opportunities to see a little bit behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. That's, I guess that makes sense. Then why I had this impression that you were retired is just you're able
I do so much.
cut that, you carve that out. Well, you do so much. You really do, man. I don't know how you keep up with it. And maybe that's a topic in itself. Is time management is such a thing for any cop that has a side goal or something they want to achieve outside of work, or a promotion. But managing that time is so key.
Brother, the big thing is compartmentalize. I have certain steps that I want to get accomplished during the day. Physical fitness is one of them. Job employment is 2, and then 3 and 4 is basically, obviously kids are first, obviously, but when it comes to managing all these different things I have going on. So with my podcast, Protectors Podcast, what I do is I do maybe 1 or 2 episodes now a week, and I make sure that I'm prepared for them. I can go in there, I can knock them out 30, 40 minutes, editing process for a podcast now for me is like 10, 15, 20 minutes. So I mean, I do that, and then I also teach college. So I know when I'm teaching a course, I have everything ready to go. I go in there, I grade everything I have to do, and I move on.
Hmm.
So I compartmentalize, and I make sure I don't try to do them all at once. So you have, I'm on the weekends. I'm never free. I'm always doing something. I'll be like competitive shooting. I'll do this. I'll do that. But it's only certain hours. But when I do the social media and stuff, it looks like, wow, man, that dude's busy all the time. But maybe 5, 6 hours a week for all the social stuff I'm doing, as far as like shooting, podcasting. But when I'm dead set on writing, that also adds in a minimum of an hour a day. And you and I'll talk about writing here in a few minutes, but a minimum of an hour a day, because once you commit, you have to commit. That's the absolute goal when it comes to writing. If not, you're going to be like one of the people who's like, I've been working on this book, and you're like, yeah, when did you start it? About 10 years ago,
Right.
and you never finish it. So yeah, man, it's just all about, to me, it's about compartmentalizing what I need to do, and that kind of turns into time management.
Do you find you try to highlight a part of the day to do a specific kind of work? I find myself probably most prolific if it were early mornings, but probably the most creative towards the end of the evening. But that so I try to batch those things. Do you have any keys or tips on that?
Yeah, the morning, if I don't get my workout in the morning, it's tough for me to get going for working out. As far as that, when it
Hmm.
comes to writing, I like to write at night. In the morning, if I don't get my, I'm kind of just slogging around until I get my coffee and my stuff. But at night, I like to actually sit in front of the TV and write. That's when I get to, my daughter and I, or my son and I, will watch a TV show, and I can kind of keep focus on it twice. But I have a little laptop desk, put my laptop on there, and I just write as I'm doing that, because a lot of people, like, when it comes to writing, especially nonfiction, it's basic facts. Now, if I'm going to write like a fiction novella or a fiction book, then it's a lot different from there.
Hmm. And do you try to? I've heard a lot of writers talk about just emphasizing like 3 bad pages or 5 bad pages, and I'm asking because a lot of cops say, "Oh, I should write a book. I have a book's worth of stories in my career," and it's usually true for most of us, but they don't get to it. But do you edit as you go, or you just try to like get something down and you go back and revise and edit? Because I've also heard
Nah,
Tim Ferriss say, what's his quote? It's something he was told was he turned in his first draft to his editor, and they said, "Congratulations, you're halfway there." Uh,
yeah, my philosophy is this: write, edit later. So I do what they call a mind map.
oh
So
yeah,
I'll
I
take,
love
like,
those.
for my book, I took my me. I'm the topic. So I put me in the middle of it, and then I branch off. That's a circle, and then one circle will be over. Okay, I was in a border patrol. I put a circle there. Scroll off to the other side of me. I was in the army. I put a circle there. So let's say, for instance, the border patrol. I could put, okay, I was on an ATV unit there. I worked in the mountains here. Hey, I encountered this there. So that's 3 different stories out of the one area. I was in a border patrol.
Hmm.
Shift over to the army. The army could be like, okay, I was enlisted, so that's one separate block. I was an officer, one separate block. I went to Iraq, that's one block. Training, etc., stuff like that. So you map this whole thing out, and I always try to explain to people, if you write, it is so difficult to write from point A to point B to point C, like in chronological order.
Hmm.
But hey, like, let's say, for instance, my next book is going to be on pivoting, on transitioning, and I'm going to be writing on different topics of that. So I'll do the same thing with that, with mind map. So I'll map it out like I did my book. So when I'm sitting down in front of the TV or something, when I have creative ideas at night about my background, I'll write about that area. So I won't write about, hey, I was born in the Appalachian Mountains area, or I lived by the Appalachian Mountains area. I'll be like, okay, tonight I'm going to be writing about this time I worked a drug case, and it's specific about that case. So I could jump all around, and then later on you merge it all into a book. So if you're writing about your story, you were a sergeant, a lieutenant, you were this, you could write about different points of that. You started a podcast, you could write like a whole area of that. But you don't have to write about everything, like A to B to C to D.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. We sometimes get hung up on it, and then it ends up being overwhelming, or just this beast
Hmm.
of a material you try
That's
to.
the word right there, overwhelming. And
Yeah,
then you never finish.
yeah, you try to cover a 30-year career chronologically, you're just going to get into the weeds
Yeah.
real fast. So yeah,
So how about
you
you,
do.
man?
Yeah, so go
How
ahead.
did you end up in California?
So I never thought I was gonna be a cop, like, ever. Like, it never crossed my mind. The only interactions I had with the cops were running from them in high school, you know.
Ah,
And so it really wasn't on my radar at all. And I was going in the film and music industry. And so through high school and college, I was working for record labels. I worked at a radio station, had a radio show, and was out in New York City for a couple summers during college doing internships, and got a job offer to move to New York City, which was my dream job and my dream city to live in. I always wanted to live in New York City because that's where the action is and always will be, I think. And so I was working for Atlantic Records. I was 22, and I had the greatest job you could have in music, I thought at the time anyway, which was artist relations. And that's like the fancy way of saying you're in charge of keeping rock stars happy. And here I'm 22. I get a company credit card and access to the company car service, and I'm making like $0, take home. But um, this is in '99 and 2000. So at Atlantic at the time, it was like all the big stars were on Atlantic: Stone Temple Pilots, Kid Rock, Tori Amos, Jewel, Led Zeppelin, long Phil Collins, long litany, POD, long litany of massive bands. Sugar Ray was huge at the time. Skid Row from back in the day. And so, yeah, I was basically tasked with, like, when they would come to town, it was my job to, like, make sure they got the lunch they want. If they wanted a certain hotel or a certain hotel room, that we got that. If it was their birthday, I'd go gift shopping for them for my boss. If there was award ceremonies in town, I was part of the group that would plan the parties and that sort of stuff, and the showcases. And so I was like a wing of the publicity department. And I had horrible bosses, but the job was a lot of fun. And never thought I'd leave New York City. And but lo and behold, one of my bosses from one of my internships, a guy that I actually really loved working for, great human being, the exact opposite of the bosses I had there, offered me a job to help start a record label for a film studio for New Line Cinema. New Line Cinema is known for, like, Lord of the Rings, Austin
mm-hmm.
Powers, Dumb and Dumber, some of the goofier movies out there. And it was a great chance to stand up a brand new record label with a guy that I highly respected. And I thought, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. He's like, cool, you got to come to LA. I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to live in California. Ick. And then thought about it some more, had some more rough interactions with my bosses. Thought, it's maybe I'll go out there for a couple of years. And then in 2 or 3 years, I'll come back as the East Coast head of the label when we're massive and we got platinum records all over the walls. And I'll live in New York the rest of my life. And so I agreed, and I came out here, and I was here probably like 2 months before I thought, oh no, I'm staying. Like, it's pretty great out here. It's pretty great. But it was through that process. I left New York shortly before 9/11. And I think I was fortunate that I didn't have any direct connections to anyone who was lost in that, but felt it very deeply. And I have friends that lost people. I used to walk by firehouses every day on my way to work, that when I would come back there and I would travel back to New York for business, were still hugely impactful for me too. I remember, if you live in New York City at the time in 99, 2000, like, if you got up in the subway and you're kind of turned around about which stairs you came up on or what direction you go, what you did was you looked up to you found the Twin Towers, and then you were oriented, right? You knew where you were, and you grew up in New Jersey, you know this. So that was like your focal point and your compass. And so when that happened, it really caused me to rethink what I was doing with my life. And I was loving the job, but I was also realizing that what I was doing was not in any way going to contribute in any meaningful way to the betterment of society or my community or any of those things. And I think I've always been service oriented. I just ignored a lot of it. And for some reason, after 9/11, I thought at 23 years old, I was too old to join the military. It was just this weird, because my dad was drafted into Vietnam when he was I think 24, and they called him Pops. And so to me, it was just this weird idea that I was too old to join the military. So I was like, well, what else can I do? I went to a Citizens Academy with LA County Sheriffs, did some ride-alongs, and I was hooked. And I was like, that's for me. That's what I want to do. And I thought, I don't think I'm the guy. I don't think I can do that. I don't think I'm going to succeed in the academy. I don't think I have the guts to go out and run code to unknown dangers. That's not me, but I want to try. And at least if I try, then I can hold my head up and say, at least I gave it a shot. And, day one of the academy, thought I was going to quit. Day two of the academy, thought I was going to quit. And I thought that for 6 months straight, but just one foot in front of the other. And lo and behold, here we are 17 years later. Uh, have had a great career. Have been blessed to do a lot of really cool things, and that's a very long explanation to your very short question. But that's the journey of how I ended up in California, and because I'm originally from Colorado, so that's where I moved from back in the day.
Just getting to California, that's 15,000 words right there. Your whole like music industry and interweaving that. It's incredible,
Yeah.
man. And I never fault people for not joining the military. Never. And a lot of people have wanted to serve, but I also tell a lot of LEOs and first responders that your service is, I believe, is just as important as the military. You're serving your community, you're serving your nation, but just in a different capacity.
Yeah.
You could always give back, and you and I both know that. Like with civilians as well, just give back. You don't have to put a uniform on, you don't have to put your life in danger, but just don't be so self-centered that you're going to forget how to give back.
Yeah, that's so true. And I don't have any heartburn about not joining nowadays after I've seen like, I've done my share on my podcast too, the Squad Room. I've had lots of military guys come on who I've had Delta and Navy SEAL guys come on and say like, man, your job's way harder than mine. And we both don't believe each other when we say that, right? Because we just think the other person's job is so much harder, but it really is. It's just about service. There's a quote I love. I used it when I did a TED talk. Romain Rolland, who's a Nobel laureate, and he said, "A hero is a man who does what he can." And I think that's just a great, simple explanation for do what you can, and you're going to contribute in some way. And I didn't think I could do this, but lo and behold, here we are.
Absolutely. Do something.
Right.
Do something.
Yeah.
I love that you joined, and I love that you're pushing on 17 years. I'm on the cusp of my career, and that's such a weird area to be in. Literally this week I emailed my human resources and said, January 31st, 23 years, I'm out. I'm going to retire. And it's weird to be starting this whole process and that movement into, my identity for the last 30 years from 1993 until 2023 has been one way or the other in uniform or some type of service. And I'm trying to find other ways to give back. I'm trying not to do what one of my good friends did. He retired out of the FBI at 57. They couldn't kick him out, you know, and then he's now a sheriff's deputy. And I think he might have just had his first year. So he went from being a supervisor in the FBI to like dropping all the way down to being like a cadet going through the sheriff's academy. Now he's on the street doing street stuff. And I'm like, wow, man, that's I know you want to give back, but man, whew.
Yeah, that's not going to be my path.
You don't
I'll
see
hit.
yourself jumping back into an academy somewhere.
No, the first one was rattling enough, but I mean, there's a lot of guys that want to do that, and I think that's great, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think a lot of others. I was just talking about this yesterday with a guy who's walking out after 30 years at his agency, and he's got a plan. But so many of us, we've all seen it. The guy he hits 30 years, or he decides it's time to go, and he's like, "You'll never see me again. I'm out the door. I'm going to go travel." The wife and I. And like I work for a sheriff's office, so we handle the courts, right? So then like 2 months later, you're going into court, and here he is working extra duty as a bailiff.
Yeah.
You're like, dude, what happened to the big plans? Like, you get bored, you don't have a mission, you don't have some way to give back like that, and you're kind of listless. And people end up back in the job, and it's just like, man, my goal is to get 23 years, which will put me right at 50, and then walk out the door and never put on a uniform again. And not stop service, but just never put that uniform back on. But got to have a plan.
Yeah, and I've been planning for a long time. Whether or not it comes to fruition, I don't know. We'll see. But the big thing is I want to teach more college. I teach cyber, I teach a bunch of other stuff. And I want to do this podcast. I mean, you and I both do podcasts. We both have hundreds of episodes now. mean, that's a lot of time
Yeah.
invested. And we talked to a lot of cops. We talked to a lot of people that are tier one, a lot of regular soldiers, regular cops, tier one SWAT, everything. We
Hmm.
talked to a lot of regular people. And a
Yep.
lot of them want to start a podcast, and it's like, that's the other thing. They want to write a book or start a podcast. And I'm telling people when they start a podcast, it's like, have a plan. Don't go out and buy a whole bunch of fancy equipment. Start the podcast. Do it as professional as you possibly can. I used to say you could do it on your phone, but now I kind of shy people away from doing it on their phone
Yeah,
because
me
it
too.
is really entertainment. People need to
Mhm.
people need to want to listen. And if you're like in an echo chamber, driving your car on your phone, talking about your day, but get past 5 episodes. Do five
Right.
episodes and see where you're going from there, and keep pushing it on. And oh, by
Yeah.
the way, if you want to write a book, do a podcast like you're writing a book. Talk
Yeah.
about those topics, map it out.
Oh, and I mean, you get into the advanced stuff of the synergies of it, right? And transcribe if you're talking about it on a podcast and transcribing it. So here we are talking about being like long-term podcasters and like giving all this advice. And what do I do in the middle of that conversation? Is I bump something and shut the whole thing down. And so we had to start over, everybody. So just so if you're wanting to start a podcast and you think you'd have to be completely polished and professional, I'm warning you right now. Well, I'm telling you right now, you don't, because I just screwed that up. But little honesty there. I could have edited all that out and no one would ever know. But
I am so glad we're doing this because this happened to me yesterday. I had a really important guest when we literally, I scheduled maybe 3 or 4 months ahead of time here and there. This one's like 6 months. And I'm thinking, okay, it's a little bit older gentleman. I give him a Zoom link and I'm thinking, okay, because I typically use a program called StreamYard. But for some reason, I'm like, okay, I'm going to use Zoom because everybody knows Zoom. I go on there, it's choppy the whole time. The audio is horrible. And I'm like, through the time, I'm like, oh man, I look professional now. And then I had to send him a StreamYard, and then we did it from there. So yeah, man, and this talks about like something about what you and I were talking about before about it being an imposter. When it
yeah.
comes to podcasting, it's like podcasting, law enforcement, everything. You get to a point where you think, hey, I'm a professional. I got this. And you're like, am I really? And that's the thing about being like a quote unquote subject matter expert on anything. And it's interesting, man.
After the riots and unrest of the summer of 2020, I began to get increasingly concerned about the fact there's so much of my life that is out there accessible to the public. And yes, I know that I'm a public figure in some sort of way, but even then, it still makes me uncomfortable. And I've been trying to figure out where the line should be drawn between what is shared on this podcast or on social media or in interviews I give and what should remain private for the security and safety of my family. Even though I'm a public person, that doesn't mean I want my personal information out there for the bad guys to find. I've arrested enough of them in my career that it makes me nervous to think that my family could be exposed to those dangers. Not long ago, a suspect showed up at the front door of my partner's house, 45 miles away from the station. I've had enough of worrying about it and felt completely outmatched by the internet. I mean, it's the internet. Trying to take my name off of Google seems insurmountable, and I learned that honestly, it is. But there's a lot that we can do to protect ourselves, and that's removing our names from people's search sites and breaking the links between our home address and our names. I learned all this from my friends at officerprivacy.com, who are helping me to clean up my side of the internet. A quick Google search shows just a shocking amount of information about where I live, where I used to live, my family members, their names, their addresses, and even phone numbers. We need help protecting ourselves from the bad guys. You have partners on your beat, so get a partner on the internet. To learn more about how they can keep you safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. Yeah, it'll keep you humble in some weird spot. Anytime you're putting yourself out there, it's scary for people. I totally get that. I mean, I for the longest time had the podcast kind of persona version of me, and I was very careful to tiptoe around that at work. And I didn't want to talk about it at work. I didn't because I didn't want to look like promoting myself or that stuff. And I realized just not that long ago that I just can't do that. It's because who I am on the show is an honest reflection of who I am, and then to kind of wall some of that off at work just doesn't work. It's inauthentic. It puts me kind of in an inauthentic position at work because people are hearing, some people are hearing like what I actually think, or those kinds of things. But then to go to work, and I don't know, it's a weird dynamic. And you're still working too, and I know you have to navigate that too. It's but we all think that we don't know enough, or that we're not the expert, or that we don't have any advice to give or perspective, and that's absolutely false for any of us. We all have a unique voice, and someone out there needs to hear it. And I can't tell you, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, where how many emails have you gotten where someone was like, I thought I was the only one who
Mm-hmm.
who
Yeah.
felt that way, or thought that, or had this experience, right? It happens all the time. And it's not that you have to have Joe Rogan numbers of downloads for that to land with people. It's just you got to find the right people who connect with your voice, your ideas, and you can start growing. But yeah, don't do it on your phone. There's too many there's too many great things out there nowadays. All these, I mean, when you and I started, I mean, it was basically Zoom was your only option if you weren't going to do in person,
Mm-hmm.
and you did have to buy some kind of expensive gear just because that was all that was out there. But now you've got like Yeti and all these other, direct to your computer microphones that sound great. You do not have to spend much money at all to have a really good setup. And I learned by YouTube. I watched a bunch of
Yeah.
YouTube videos on how to start a podcast, and I just would pause the video, do what they say, pause the video, do what they say, and lo and behold, what, 7 years later, and you're about the same, right?
I think 2019.
19. Okay, yeah. But a long time. And I mean, in podcast years, we're like, the
Ancient.
grandfather generation.
And when I first started, I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and I was letting the guests dictate how the show was going to go. So if they're calling me on a phone as they're driving down the road, I may sound good, but they sound like crap, and it just it doesn't work. You have to make sure that if you're going to do an interview based show, that your guest is ready to go, and you have
Yeah.
to remember that you're giving up your time, and your time is valuable. I mean, when it comes to imposter syndrome, there's another thing too. Is like when you get to a certain point in your life, celebrity doesn't mean really anything to you.
Hmm.
As far as you've been around celebrities for a long time. I mean, especially pre California. Now that you're in California, you probably pop into them here and there. And now it's like I want to talk to people who have real conversations and people who are authentic and
Hmm.
people who actually think, hey man, maybe I am an imposter. Because a lot of times those people are the ones that really aren't the imposters. They're the
Oh,
ones
for
that
sure.
really do have the experience. And you're like, wow. When you talk to them, you're like, man, I'm gonna be 50 in about 50 days. And I'm like, man, I have so much lessons learned. So many times I fell flat on my face with crap.
Hmm.
And then yeah.
Are you familiar with Stephen Pressfield and his writings?
It sounds really familiar.
He wrote a book called The War of Art. So he also wrote Gates of Fire, and he writes a lot of the sort of ancient warrior, like historical fiction stuff. But he writes a lot also on just the creative process. And he's got a great book called The War of Art. Definitely recommend that for anybody who's got any sort of a creative bent to them. Uh, and the last page of that book, I think it was the last page. I would read that. I read that every day for like a year at one point. And the short version is, you're cheating the world of your gifts if you don't contribute your thoughts, your ideas, your experience, the lessons you've learned. And how dare you keep that to yourself when it could save somebody else, or it could help somebody else? And I just love that idea. And it kind of gives you an emboldened sense of like you say, we're talking about service earlier. If people can think about uh, sharing themselves, being authentic, and being out there and quote unquote vulnerable about the lessons they've learned, don't think of it as putting yourself on the pedestal. Think of it as how you're serving the next generation, or someone else, or maybe a generation above you that's now transitioned out of law enforcement and is struggling. You're serving someone out there by putting it out there. So do that. It's your obligation to do that. I just love that idea.
Hmm. I like it too, man. I like, it's like you have to. I don't want all this going away. That's why I wrote a book. And I think a lot of us have these experiences. And you don't have to write like a memoir.
Hmm.
You don't have to write like uh, try to copy anybody or do anything like that. But getting these lessons learned out there and talking about that,
Yeah.
I think it's
And
a great
it's,
idea, man.
I think a lot of us, especially as we're not too far apart. I'm 45, you're about to be 50. Um, and we both got kids, and you start to look at the idea of legacy and what what is going to be that like third chapter of your life. And for me, like, I want that to be turning around and giving a hand, both to my kids, but also to some of these amazing people that are coming into my profession and your profession right now in law enforcement. Amazing people are coming into the job right now. And anyone who walks through that door and signs up in this environment, like, I look up to those kids because they're coming into something that I didn't have to come into, and they're still signing up. And if I can help them in any way, then I'm doing my work, you know.
Absolutely, brother. I mean, that's the big thing about, like, I wrote my book just because I wanted my kids to know who I was, not this older
Hmm.
version of me, especially, you know. And
Right.
as we're talking here, I'm looking at my calendar, my retirement, and then I'm like, man, 50 days until I'm 50.
That's
And then
wild.
January 31st is like right around the corner, man. And it's like, whew. Now you got me thinking. I'm like, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little excited at this transition.
But
And
usually,
then,
I mean,
yeah,
you got to feel set up pretty well, right? I mean, maybe not, but you're on court TV all the time. You're on Fox. Like, you have a voice, and you have a real perspective, and you have the depth of experience you do. Which is why you keep getting called by these media outlets to come and talk. You teach. I, are you worried about what to do with all the extra free time, or do you
no.
feel like those are going to fill it in?
Well, the big thing is monetization. I feel so guilty. Like, even writing a book, my book is basically priced at cost.
Mm,
I feel so bad about asking people for money.
hmm.
And I don't want to ask people who follow me for money. I don't. But and I used to do the Fox all the time, court TV and all that, but it's not paid. Now,
Yeah.
getting paid to go on there is different. I'm not really concerned about that, but it's more concerned about, okay, I've had a solid foundation. Somebody's told me what I need, where I need to be from, 8 to 4, 8 to 5, 8 to 6 every day for, Monday through Friday for so many years now, that it's like, it's going to be weird to take that step into, like, huh, okay, this is the new me.
Yeah.
And I'm not too concerned right now. Maybe I will be in a little while about turning in my badge and gun, because I do so much shooting sports and all sorts of other stuff. But I have a feeling that I'll eventually end up somewhere back serving some capacity or the other.
Mm.
Not necessarily in uniform, or not necessarily in law enforcement, but maybe some type of service.
So that's a perfect transition to something else I wanted to ask you about, uh, because, like, you've been in this regimented life, like you said, since 1993, where someone's always told you, or a shift has always informed you of when you need to wake up and be at work, and you're about to walk away from that structure. And the only thing that really worries me about the idea of retirement, because I'm about 5 years out, and for right now, it sounds really sweet. But the one thing that worries me is the self leadership part of that, right? And maintaining discipline and motivation and all the things we need once no one is wondering, why aren't you at your desk, or why aren't you in the squad car? How is that a concern to you at all, or do you think that you've got that handled? You've been very honest in social media recently about some of the, like, just getting back in shape, and some of the challenges that kind of seem to catch you off guard, which caught me off guard too. Where are you at with that part, walking out the door?
I don't, the health stuff is completely, it wasn't me going, hey, I need to get in shape in case I get in a fight in a battle on the street. No, it was me, like, one day, probably, but it's been 6 months, because I just got a checkup yesterday, and I'll go through this whole thing. I was eating really bad. I wasn't drinking a ton anymore. I stopped drinking as much as I used to. But that used to be my crutch as well. And I've talked about my problem with alcohol in the past. But it was just the eating and being unhealthy. I was about 45, 50 pounds overweight, more than I
Mhm.
am now. I mean, let's say I was 45 pounds heavier than I am now. Pick my daughter up from school. She's 12. We go out and we get some ice cream after school. And then I ended up I got up and I fell flat on my face, completely passed out. And I was like, holy crap. And I really had no idea where I was. I mean, I've kind of got lightheaded in the past, but this one was really weird. A Navy vet was there. He ran up to me and goes, I couldn't even get up. He's like, "Do you want me to call an ambulance?" I'm like, "Yep." And I remember my face was flat on the ground. And I remember riding in the ambulance, and my daughter's sitting behind me. And I look back, and I'm like, "You okay, babe?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm thinking to myself, "What am I doing?" So then I go there. I get the CT scans, everything. My blood pressure is crazy, crazy, crazy. And then we'll talk about it in another show. But I have toxic exposure as well from burn pits in the war. And they did a CT scan and said, "Okay, your heart's fine, but we found stuff on your lungs, like these nodules." I'm like, "Oh, this is great." So then I get home from the hospital at night and I completely changed. I have a good buddy named Aaron Williamson. He's like a former Marine. He's a fitness instructor. He's all over social media, but he was like he did the stars. He was a trainer for the stars, Stallone, J.K.
Mm.
Simmons, everybody you can imagine. He's like, "Hey, bro, I'll give you a program for free. Just do it 90 days intense program." And then I did it. And I completely changed everything. I mean, it completely changed my life. 45 pounds down. And now I set milestones. So, one quick thing. So I have to get every 6 months, I have to get my chest checked now, and it's all good now. So I'm good. Nothing's grown.
Nice.
But what I do now is I set milestones. I always find events. So a lot on social media, I'll be like, "Okay, I'm going to do the Army 10 miler. I'm going to rock it." Because I can't really run because of my lung capacity and stuff. Did that, did the Army 10 miler, which is a big race. And then I did Marine Corps half marathon. And I did the Marine Corps 10K ruck. And now last weekend I did a 7K ruck. And then I'm doing a 100-mile charity ride coming up here in January, February. Then I'm doing the Baton Death March, was a 28-mile ruck. So I'm always finding things like goals to get
Mm-hmm.
to. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing I said, "Hey, you know what? I want to do, I love shooting." So I started doing competitive shooting. And I'm not that great, but hey, it's fun. I'm getting out there getting out of my comfort zone. I
Yeah.
want to give speeches, so I'll go out and give in-person speeches now. I want to do things. So I'm always setting milestones.
Awesome. Because you mentioned earlier in the show about how you start your day with physical fitness, and it's like it sounds like it's like a deal, or it's a what's the word I'm looking for? It's it's non-negotiable. That's what it sounds
No.
like for you, but not always that way. And this is a relatively recent addition to your daily routine.
Yeah, it was, 6 months. I've been doing it 6 months.
And 45
And
pounds down, that's incredible.
yeah, you have to though, man. I can't live like that anymore about, the booze. And now so I used to drink a ton. I used to think, "Oh, I'm going to drink a lot of rum and write. It gets my creative juices." That's another reason I put out this new book, a new edition of my book, was because I wanted my clear head.
Mm,
Who wants their day the next day after you drink to be fuzzy? I mean, who wants her life to be fuzzy? So I don't fault anybody for drinking. It's just the excess.
right. It's the easiest crutch we have, and it's the most socially acceptable. It's almost and I'm not a teetotaler. I imbibe probably more than is reasonable to some, and but have had to kind of navigate that myself and look at that and be like, okay, this is not the life I want to live, and it's it can easily interfere with other things, and that fuzziness and lack of motivation that often comes as a result. But for so many of us, it's the easiest thing to reach for.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to look at you sideways if you go out for after shift drinks. In fact, they look at you sideways if you don't. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so,
That's absolutely one thing that's been, I went to an event a couple weeks ago. I had to go down to Miami for something. And I was like, so weird if you're not drinking. I mean, some people are like, hey, why aren't you drinking? I'm like, just not. So it's weird to get that. And
mhm,
that's, this all circles back to writing and podcasting too. If you, one of the biggest reasons I started a podcast a few years ago, because I wanted my own voice. And I also wanted to talk to people and I wanted to hear from their lessons learned. But then the book and writing, and I read a lot of, I read for a Skill Set magazine as well. Um, and I write fun things. Like today was, one of them's how to start a podcast, how to get in a number of challenge, how to do this, how to do that.
mhm,
But it's such a good release that it gets you away from the booze.
mhm. Yeah, I think for years, you know, because when I got into music originally through the like performing side of it, and it's really funny because now I talk to people about it and they think it's actually like a cool thing, but growing up it was not cool where I was from at all. Like the idea that you were a boy or and you sang or you played an instrument was
Yeah.
just not cool, right? And I grew up in a household where didn't matter if I played sports or not. My parents did not care, but I was going to play at least one instrument and I was going to be in the choir. And so um, I came from that side of it, and I think through the experiences of, and I was good at it too. Now, I mean, I can say that now. Like I was not just your high school choir. I was in operas. I toured internationally. I sang
Wow.
backup for 20,000 people. Did closing ceremonies of the World Cup. Sort, kind of, I say good stuff. Things I never would have talked about even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe. And that's a long version to say that I stuffed down that creative side for a long time. And I think it started to leak in unproductive ways. And if you write, if you got a podcast, if you play music, like you're a creative person. I think we all have creative outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Sports can be creative, but you got to keep those throughout your career, because if you don't, it starts to go into things like overeating or excessive drinking because you're not fully expressed. And just simply, like, I bought a guitar recently. I haven't played guitar in 15 years, but
Oh,
we
that's
bought one for my
awesome, man.
daughter. Thanks. Yeah, we bought one for my daughter. I was like, I'm getting one too. And bought that so that I can relearn to play the guitar. And just dinking around and sounding horrible is still really important. It's a creative outlet, just like a podcast is, just like writing is. Doing social media is even creative. But that's one piece of advice I have for people too, is like if you have something creative, don't let that die throughout your career. Maintain it and be proud of it. uh you know i have I have partners who are legit were rock stars, we're in bands and toured and Ozfest, or are published authors, or like we all have these gifts, and we come to work, especially in law enforcement, and I'm sure the military is relatively the same, where the creative stuff is sort of looked at sideways sometimes, but mostly by the older culture, the older generation. The newer guys get it. um and we tend to hide those parts of ourselves, but then as we create more distance and we create less integrity in our personality, I think that's where we end up with a lot of those problems. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that's
No,
my
you're
theory.
making absolute sense. I don't do what I did. You're
What's
not
that?
creative. I wasn't creative for so long. And then when I got into my 40s, I was like, I am creative. What am I thinking? Because you get so vested in getting certificates and education and doing this and training and this and that and everything. And all you care about is the job.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're later on, you're like, there's more to it than that. And I remember looking at the old timers going, what the hell are they doing after? Why aren't they, why if I'm not calling them at 8 o'clock at night, why aren't they ready to go? And now
Right.
you're like, okay, it's understandable.
Yeah, it's part of that work life balance too, and I think having kids is a great reorientation towards those things. And if
Absolutely,
you're
man.
when your kids are just inherently creative, and
That's
if
the
you can
truth,
if you can
man.
just sit down and finger paint with your 5-year-old, and you got to get over it. Like for me, I was always hung up on the mess it was going to make, and I get all stressed out, and I'd start to think
Uh,
about all the things that are going to go wrong with the paint on the floor. And for the longest time, I would have no fun painting with my own kids. And it's not to get too deep into it, but it's part of that trauma response that's just kind of inculcated into our lives, where we think of all the bad things that could happen. We do that at work. We're trained in that. We're trained to anticipate all the bad things, but eventually, as you go through your career, your brain doesn't really know that you just turn it off when you walk in the front door. And so now you're sitting down to paint with your kids and your brain's still firing off with all the things that could go wrong. And it can really, I think that's how a lot of cops end up in ruined relationships, that we don't learn the skills to decompress and detach from work in an effective way to then be able to focus on the finger painting with our kids without drinking the Jack and Coke.
exactly. You don't need that extra thing in there. Enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I took my, little things. I took my daughter to Target and we walked around for a while. We just bullshitted. And
Mm-hmm.
it's nice just to have conversations with your kids, man. and
Yeah.
not be like all hazy and think about the job and think about, and even now it is, I can see it a little tough for me with all this stuff going on to, that's why I say I compartmentalize it. And so what I'll do is when I'm done with it, I'm done with it. I'm learning how to, okay, put the laptop down, do this, do that, and focus on what is important to you. You don't always have to be doing multitasking.
Yeah. Yeah. I just recently took over, in April, I got promoted to lieutenant. And so for us, I'm now in charge of a station or a bureau. And since then, the work phone is really a leash and
Mm-hmm.
I have to be available, which I get. I signed up for it. I don't have issues with that. But there's the gotta do's, and then there's the other stuff that we often mistake as a priority that really isn't. So it's like I don't have to check my email every 10 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
I need to be available for a phone call, like, because then I tell my people if it's important, it's a phone call. Don't text me, don't email me. I don't I don't have to respond to text messages right away, and trying to set some barriers there, and just using the simple things like your like silencing notifications so that I'm
Yeah.
not constantly getting this ding in my head and this like need to
Ding.
reach. You hear that ding and your arm
Mm-hmm.
immediately starts to go for the phone, and maybe you're sitting there having a conversation with your kids and you now interrupts, or you're at family
Yeah.
dinner. That's been a challenge to not get sucked into that. But
I hear
you
you,
know,
brother.
there's lots of things out there that can help with that. But it's just we got to be aware. You got to be aware of it.
Let's recap. We learned how to bike. No, we didn't learn how to bike. I'm thinking of biking. I'm like, I got a 100-mile bike ride. That's what I got to do next today. Is I got to go
Yeah,
for a
that's
bike
that's my
ride.
other
And
hobby. So I could talk about bikes all day long as well.
oh, I need to pick your brain. We're done here. I got to get a good. I got to get a street bike. But no, the writing, finding an outlet. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's finding an outlet outside the job. And if anybody ever needs any advice with writing or podcasting or anything, feel free. My DMs are always open and my email is always available out there. But I'm always available for people who need help with that stuff. And I really do appreciate you having me on and talking about this stuff, man.
Yeah, it's been great to have this back and forth, and I love having other podcasters on because we can talk about that stuff. Also, for people out there, pro tip: if you're going to start a podcast, get other podcasters on because they're not afraid to talk. you know, when you vet your guests, podcasters are great for that stuff. And same, I'm happy to answer any questions. My socials at the Squad Room for anyone who has a question, or Garrett at the squadroom.net is my email. I'll answer those questions all day long. And there's I just think the more these conversations, regardless of who you are, your experience, the more of these conversations we make available out there to all the other people out there, all the other cops that don't have one, but they need someone to connect with, or they need a perspective maybe they haven't heard yet. Man, I'm all for it. There's no competition. It's just all about serving our community.
I love it, brother. Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. And we got to do more of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again, and we'll dive into another topic. It's been great.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're new to the show, make sure you check through our catalog of episodes because you're going to find some amazing guests and some great actionable ideas you can take into your day. Also, I want to offer you something I'm very excited about, and it's absolutely free. It's my Tactical Tuesday newsletter. Every Tuesday, I want to bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. It may be a book I want to share, some gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check the show notes for this episode, and you can find it there, and I promise we won't sell or spam your email address. Before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you. If you got something out of this episode, if you were inspired by our conversation today, I want to challenge you right now to take a photo of your podcast player as you're playing this episode, and I want you to share it with 3 friends, people who you think need to hear what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend that they listen to it. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. If you have a few seconds, please leave a comment with your review because it really helps us spread the word about the show, and it helps more cops find the valuable lessons that we have here. Also, join us on Facebook at our Facebook group, follow our page, and on Instagram at The Squad Room. A special thanks to today's sponsor, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important, check them out at OfficerPrivacy.com/The Squad Room, where their deal for you as a listener of this show is they'll give you a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, In Time. In Time is the state-of-the-art, easy-to-use, and incredibly simple way to schedule shifts, improve subpoena compliance, reduce officer fatigue, and manage special events, and much more. Make sure to check them out at intime.com/the squad room to learn more about their affordable and simple solutions for public safety. Also, there are some other great companies who support the podcast and support you as well. Go to thesquadroom.net/support to see exclusive deals from Signature Coins, Hard to Kill Fitness, Onnit, Ranger Up, Hardhead Veterans, and Audible. And if you're looking for the best fitting ballistic helmet that exceeds NIJ standards and won't break the bank, check out hardheadveterans.com and use the coupon code SQUADROOM to get $20 off your helmet. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.